Audio on demand from Vision Christian Media.
Coming up today on The Story.
At that time for me, I wanted nothing to do with girls because you come off stage and you just get mobbed from girls and stuff. They used to sell our hair when we get haircuts. The girls would grab our hair off the floor of the hairdressers and sell it at the local girls' school. It was just crazy. As an 8-year-old, I wanted nothing to do with Sheila.
The Story.
G'day, I'm Jimmy Colefax. Welcome to The Story. Well, Dave and Shelly Drage began life as child prodigies in Australia's country music scene. They met as kids, became parents as teenagers, went off the rails a bit, and have both had a number of significant medical challenges. But now they're on fire for God and wanting to fire up the rest of Australia. We'll hear their story today as they have a chat with Shelly Scowen.
Dave and Shelly, it's great to have you here on The Story.
How are you doing?
Hey, Shelly, it's good to be here.
Yeah, thanks so much for joining us. You do both have fascinating stories that are very much intertwined as well. But let's start off with you, Shelly. You've literally always been talented when it comes to music, but your childhood was a fairly difficult one, wasn't it?
Yes, it was. So I grew up in a family in the 70s. I'm a 50-year-old this year, so that's been exciting. And my dad was what we know now clinically is termed a psychopath, and he was quite a violent alcoholic and very abusive with my mum, my siblings and myself in every realm, really, emotionally, physically, sexually, the works.
And so that's always going to have a huge impact on anyone, certainly in childhood, but also, into the rest of your life. That went on to affect you, obviously, into your teenage years?
Oh, yeah. So the first 15 years of my life, my dad lived with us on and off. Back then, there wasn't a lot of support for a single mum, and there were 4 kids. So she finally, when I was about 15, got the courage to say, I've had enough. And then I became very rebellious, very promiscuous, bit of a wild child. But, yeah, definitely I was a pretty big risk taker because so much had happened to me. It was a bit like, well, what else can happen? So I was taking on the world in a big way. And by that time, too, I was already very heavily involved in the country music scene, as well as I was doing Amy B voice training. And I'd won a lot of awards and worked my way up the ladder in the Queensland country music scene. So I sort of was in a lot of, I guess, venues and things that were adult-focused and an adult world, and I was an out-of-control 15, 14, 16-year-old. Yeah.
It's interesting in that you had these two sides to your life even back then where, you were a successful musician but also struggling so much in your personal life as well.
Yeah, I think I know a lot more about how God wired me now. And when I first got selected to sing and perform, I was like a little 5, 6-year-old at school, and this lady saw me on stage at some school performance and went up to my mum and said, can I have your child, please? She's adorable and I want to, take her under my wing. So, and I was always that kid that was forever singing and you couldn't shut me up, and I was always making a noise and very outgoing. And I guess I loved recognition and thrived on recognition and didn't get a lot of that at home, obviously, because of the environment being quite toxic. So I think performing, which it was at the time, really was a venue for me to get that affirmation and recognition that I so craved.
Well, Dave, you were also in the country music scene at this point. You were also a child prodigy, very young and doing some great things. So tell us about how you met Shelly.
Oh, wow. Well, it was probably more the other way around, but I grew up. Remember the old Partridge family back in the 70s?
Yes. Yep.
And that was us in Queensland, Australia. And we travelled around with my 3 other brothers and mum and dad, and did a lot of shows with a lot of people in a lot of places in the country industry. So I got to hang out with some great folks and sing with some great folks and tour with some great folks. And had a lot of great times along the way. And, it was fun. I met Shelly, but she met me before I met her. She met me on stage, but she turned up one night to our place, and I was 8 years old, and at that time for me, I wanted nothing to do with girls, because you'd come off stage and you'd just get mobbed from girls and stuff. And give you an idea, they used to sell our hair when we get haircuts. The girls would grab our hair off the floor of the hairdressers and sell it at the local girls' school.
Wow.
It was just crazy.
That is a bit strange, isn't it?
So, as an 8-year-old, I wanted nothing to do with Sheila.
I think most 8-year-old boys don't want a whole lot to do with girls. I mean, they have girl germs.
Yeah, that's right. So in walked Shelly into our house to come and rehearse with us. And so I actually went and hid under my bed and stayed there until I absolutely had to come out and go into the rehearsal room and rehearse. So that's when we first met. But Shelly's probably better to tell you when she first saw me.
Was it love at first sight for you, Shelly?
Oh, definitely. As an 8-year-old, we were all performing at like fates and different venues all around Brisbane, and Dave played himself down a lot here. He was actually pretty much born with a guitar in his hand, and his family are extremely successful in the country music industry. His dad's hands are in the hands of fame in Tamworth. Keith Urban grew up with him and his brothers like his mother. So to put it in perspective, our boys got on stage at this, I think it was a fete at a school, and I was there with my duet partner, and Keith Urban was on stage with Dave and his brothers, and she had a crush on Keith Urban and said, I want to marry him. And I looked up and saw Dave and said, see that little one? Because Dave's the youngest of the 4 boys and Keith. I said, I'm going to marry him. I like him.
I didn't stand a chance after that.
He couldn't get away then. It was like destiny had grabbed me, and I think too, I'd been handed on to Dave's family because the lady that took me under her wing got cancer. And so I rocked up to Dave's household, and it's this crazy, lovey-dovey household with 4 brothers and mum and dad that, I don't know, his mum hugged you and you knew you'd been hugged. And there was a lot of love. They said, I love you all the time, and just were really happy and really did everything together, which was quite weird for me. And I definitely fell in love with Dave, but I think I married his family, really. His mum and dad got me in as well because I just remember they were always a part of my youth and my life. And his dad was one of those great men in the background, along with my own grandfather, who were great, lovely men who really respected women and spent a lot of time esteeming kids and involved with just bringing out the best in people. So I think I just wanted in, and Dave definitely, his eyes and his little smile, and he had long hair, so the hair was a thing. It was all like, yeah, that's the one for me.
That's amazing. And I'm glad that at least half of the story is romantic. Poor old Dave went and hid under the covers. But Shelley, that's a good romantic story. Thank you very much for that.
As romantic as an 8-year-old could be at the time, I guess.
Well, that's the thing. That's what I was going to ask. Did you have, whatever a romantic relationship looks like when you're 8 years old? Or was there a period of time where you were kind of just mates and then you realised as, I don't know, teenagers or something that, hey, maybe there's more to this? How did that all kind of work out?
We got put together into a Queensland's youngest country show band, and we toured up and down the east coast of Australia, and we were doing some gigs down in Tamworth. And I remember because Shelly and I were hanging out quite a bit by this stage, and we were 11 and 12.
Yeah, we were pretty much inseparable from the age of about 9.
Yeah, but we were about 11 and 12, and we came off stage, and I went back to the campsite, and we just sat around and chatted and stuff. And as one romantic child said to another child, "Well, aren't you going to ask me?" And I said, "Ask you what?" And she said, "Like, you want to go out with me?" I said, "Okay then."
And here we are.
And here we are.
It was very platonic at that age, may I say, though. It wasn't hot and steamy at all for a while.
Yeah.
So, yeah, we were touring together and stuff, so that's how things sort of blossomed.
And also growing up in the industry, like you're together all the time, you're at festivals, you're hanging out at music practices. So we did spend a lot of time together on weekends and weeknights. And so it was probably inevitable, really, I guess.
You're listening to The Story. Today, Shelly Scowen is chatting with Dave and Shelly Drage, who began life as child prodigies in Australia's country music scene. We just heard how they met as kids and eventually became a couple. Next, they'll share some of the challenges they've faced, including becoming parents as teenagers. All that and more when we return.
The Story. If this program has highlighted something you'd like prayer for, we'd love to pray for you. Call 1-800-PRAY-FOR-ME. That's 1-800-772-936. It's a free call. Or text 0401 132 888.
Hi, I'm Jimmy Colefax and this is The Story. We're continuing with Shelly Scowen chatting with Dave and Shelly Drage, who began life as child prodigies in Australia's country music scene. Before the break, we heard how they met as kids. Next, we'll hear about their rebellious teenage years that included becoming parents when Dave was 15 years old and Shelly was 16.
I had an amazing family. I had a mum that would do anything for anyone, and when she hugged you, you knew you'd been hugged, and you could feel that love. And Dad as well was always around, and I have nothing but great memories of my mum and dad and even my brothers. And I experienced zero abuse as a child, yet I was super rebellious and used to give my mother so much grief. I was a party boy. I was on the stage. I had access everywhere, and we were playing pubs and clubs and things. So by the age of 10, I was an alcoholic because alcohol was free, because I was in the band, and it was never an issue because all the alcohol was backstage. You didn't have to go to the bar to get it. And I was smoking at the age of 10 and, started experimenting with drugs by about the age of 12. So I was just partying hard and living the life. They talk about sex, drugs and rock and roll. Well, it works with country music too, very much.
What did your parents think about all of that? Were they trying to step in and make you stop, or were they just letting you go with it?
I don't think either of them could have stopped me. I was that rebellious and I was going to do what I was going to do. But, I was always the happy person, and, when you're the artist on the stage, everyone wants to be your mate. But, again, you're craving that appreciation and the glory of the stage, and the depth of relationships was very shallow. So it was actually a very, not lonely, because I was never lonely, but relationships were very, in the industry, everyone wanted something from you. So
I didn't get into drugs or alcohol or smoke. I was just wild, again, out of control, party, risk-taking. But, because I hated alcohol, I hated cigarettes, and I wouldn't smoke for anything because I was singing. So we had very different vices, even from a young age.
Then your lives changed when you were 15 and 16 years old, a fairly significant events with the birth of your first child. And that's obviously a pretty young age to be becoming parents.
Yeah, it was pretty wild and crazy back then, but we actually really embraced it. And I remember sitting down with all our parents and having the discussion, and we said, well, we're going to keep this child and we're going to raise him and move on. They were wanting us to get married at this point, and we said, no, we don't want to get married just yet. We want to know that we are in this and all that sort of thing. So it was tough. We were working 4 and 5 jobs as well as touring and everything to do with the music industry as well. And, no single mother's pension back then. Shelley worked on checkouts while she was pregnant. So, it was definitely a life-changing event.
I think, too, it was a very different time. Like, Chris was born in 1987, and I was still considered a minor, so my mum was still my legal guardian.
Mm.
So, Dave's right, there was no Centrelink or anything for me, or not that I really wanted to go that way, but we weren't living together. We were still at home, and because of our strong view of keeping our baby and our parents' strong view that we couldn't parent a child that young, we both left home and lived with grandparents. Dave lived with his grandma and I lived with my grandfather, and I think if it wasn't for those grandparents taking us under their wing and just supporting us the way that they did, I don't know where we would have been, because one set of parents decided we should adopt and the other set of parents, it was an abortion or nothing, and we didn't like either of those options. So, I think it was a really full-on time, but also...
And growing up in a good Catholic home as well, it was quite an issue.
Yes, I'm
big
sure.
issue. We'd both been born and raised Catholic, and I still remember there was a nun that was amazing to me and visited me and helped me afterwards. But apart from that, we both got quite ostracised. So we both went, Lord, that's God.
We're not
interested, and see you later.
Not that we were good church-going folk anyway.
No. But we had the foundational stuff because we'd been through schools at Catholic schools, and Dave's family were Irish Catholic. My mum grew up in a very devout home, but my dad became Catholic because they got married, sort of thing. So we weren't as full on as Dave's family, I think.
Mm. Well then, Dave, your world got turned upside down again the following year, 1988, when you had a pretty bad accident that obviously affects a country music star fairly severely. Tell us about that day.
Yeah, I was at work and had a work accident and amputated 3 of my fingers on my right hand, which tends to cause some troubles when you're playing a guitar.
Yes, it does.
And I really hit rock bottom at that point. They told me I'd never play again. And, of course, the industry moves on. So, as soon as you're out of the picture, the industry just moves on without you. And when everything around you and your identity is wrapped up in the stage and all of a sudden you can't be on the stage, it sends you into one heck of a spin. So the drugs increased, the alcohol increased. For the first time in my life, I discovered what anger was, and just very unhappy with life and God as well, because, amazingly, I wasn't doing anything for him, but I was angry at him for having this happen. Mm-hmm. How could he do this? How could he let this happen to me? And, of course, I think the nail in the coffin, so to speak, was when I was in the hospital waiting to have surgery, and my family sent in the Catholic priest to give me my last rites. And I remember I grabbed him by the scruff of the neck and literally, and I said, I ain't going anywhere yet, and told him to get out in no uncertain terms. And as from that point, you would never get me back into a church, and I wanted absolutely nothing to do with God.
Shelley, where were you in all of this? A teenage mum with a 12-ish month-old baby, and then this has obviously all happened to Dave. What was going on for you?
At the time, I was still living with my grandfather, and I was actually working full-time. I'd started some nursing, like a nurse's aide work, and so Chris was in care and I was working around that, and Dave was doing his own thing but still seeing us on weekends, and we were trying to just work hard to get some money together and do life as adults, as teenagers, really. I guess the call for me came in. I got home from work at like 3 o'clock and got a message from my grandfather during Dad's work that he'd had an accident. When I rang, it was in hysterics, and they basically couldn't tell me anything, and I got to his work and just saw a heap of blood and realised something drastic had happened, and they handed me a cut with some mutilated fingers and said he'd gone to the hospital, and I was like, okay. So from there...
Here's your husband.
Yeah. From there, I guess it was trying to support Dave and work through his grief, because when you have an amputation like that, it's a lot of grief.
Absolutely.
And resentment and anger. And also, I was pretty much the breadwinner then, because it took him a while to get back to work, as well as the doctors sort of said, you two need to move in together, because if Dave goes home to his mum, she's not going to do very well, because, like, the doctors gave us this spiel to not sort of react when they took those bandages down, and she was the one going, oh, my baby, you poor darling, come home to mommy. And so from there, like, Chris was awesome, our son, and he was a beautiful baby and always loved by both of us, but I think I got quite resentful with Dave because I had to pick up a lot of the slack, which I was already doing anyway, which in hindsight silly, but we moved in together, we set up a little house. We did get married that year as well, which was already planned in November, and Dave just got angrier and angrier, and I was being guided by his OTs and people of, you know, making him cut up steaks and making him do things, and he'd pick up plates and throw them at me and tell me to, you know, get stuffed and all sorts of things. So I guess for me, it probably wasn't as full on as it could have been had I not had the childhood I'd had. But he wasn't abusive to me. He was just angry at the world because he'd lost his fingers. And I knew he wasn't taking it out on me so much. I knew he was hurting, but I didn't know how to help him. And I was still in my own mind. I was a very broken person and had my own problems. So it wasn't a great way to start our life together. But
Chris, really, after that point, he was our
world.
He was our world, and he was our focus.
Mm.
So he actually gave us something positive to focus on and pull us through.
And we both just adored this little boy and knew that he was precious and knew that we really wanted a life together. So I think that's what kept us going. And this is even without God. We just knew that we wanted to be a family. So, yeah.
Well, that was part one of Dave and Shelly Drage sharing their story as a couple. We've already heard of several challenges they've faced in life, and as they continue next time, unfortunately, we'll hear more. But we'll also hear how God impacts their lives in a wonderful way and gives them a heart for impacting others. At this point in the story, we've been hearing how they are very far from God and that Dave is actually very angry at God for what had happened to him. But the Bible verse that comes to mind is Psalm chapter 34, verse 18, which says, "The Lord is close to the brokenhearted and saves those who are crushed in spirit." No matter what we're going through, no matter how defeated or crushed we may feel, God is there for us and wants us to put our faith in trust in Him so that He can help us to heal and be restored. If you're going through something like that in your own life right now and feel a bit brokenhearted, we'd love to pray for you about that. Our prayer line is 1-800-PRAY-FOR-ME. That's 1-800-772-936. We'd really love to pray for you on that number, 1-800-772-936. Well, thanks for joining us for part one of Dave and Shelly's story. Until next time, when we'll hear part two, I'm Jimmy Colefax, encouraging you to share your story with someone today.
Next time on The Story.
I asked for people who wanted to hand their lives over to Christ to come down the front. And I remember standing there, trembling with my eyes shut, going, I'm not going up front, I'm not going up front. What's Shelly going to think? What's Shelly going to think? And, you know, I don't even know how I got down there, but I ended up down there, an absolute blubbering mess. And I looked up and Shelly's standing right beside me doing the same thing.
Once again, Dave and Shelly Drage will join us to share more of their story. They began life as child prodigies in Australia's country music scene and then went off the rails a bit, but we'll hear how their lives were completely turned around next time.
The Story. Just another way Vision is connecting faith to life.
taking time to listen to this audio on demand from Vision Christian Media. To find out more about us, go to vision.org.au.